So why don't we just move to the speakers? We have some special guests tonight. I don't know who's speaking first.
Bill is.
Bill? Come on up, Bill.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'm really impressed with the congeniality of this group because I hail from the Republican committee in Nashua. And we'd never have a meeting in a pool hall. It was sticks and balls around and everything. That would not work out that well. I was Speaker of the House for terms, spent 5 terms in the legislature. And since I left about two or three years ago, my political activity has been principally centered around hosting a center-right meeting. I'm not sure if you've heard of a fellow by the name of Grover Nordquist, but Grover sponsors meetings in, I think it's up to like 10 or 12 countries, or in somewhere around 45, 46 states. And the intent of those meetings is to draw together the conservative and the right of center communities in each state and give us to talk with each other. And so we have it's twice a month, and we have a few rules. One of them is, and I'll respect it a little bit, maybe just in the breach, is that the talks are supposed to be about 3 to 5 minutes long, because we want it to be fairly fast-paced. And the other principal rule, is that we won't engage in any sort of personal attacks. And I'm all for that when it comes to Republicans. I'm not for that when it comes to Jeanne Shaheen. And that's the reason I'm here to talk to you today. She's coming up for re-election, and I'm looking at that race. Now, back in the last presidential primary, I co-chaired Ted Cruz's campaign here in New Hampshire, and I was proud to do it. And the reason I supported Ted is the reason I support Donald Trump now. Donald Trump has what I saw in Ted, which is the courage to confront the issues. And I think the president has shown us time and again, as we've watched what amounts to nothing more than a slow motion coup attempt to be run up against him, how he's had the courage to get things done. I mean, look what he's done with the tax reforms there. He's brought prosperity to our country. His regulatory reforms, cutting back on the regulations. You know, we've had some good Republican presidents over time. My hero, and I think probably a lot of all of us, is Ronald Reagan. And yet, President Trump is accurate. He says no Republican, no conservative, indeed no president has had such a productive 2 years as he had. Look again how he's balanced the judiciary. I think we're up to 100 judges who respect the Constitution have been confirmed by the Senate. He's remaking the judiciary. Just last week, for the first time probably in most of our memory, we got a good ruling out of the Ninth Circuit. I mean, usually the Ninth Circuit would look at who was in the case, not what the law was for the case, and if who was a conservative or Republican, you lose. And now we see more even-handed decisions coming out of it. Now, the results of this effort, again, are just startling. Look again. You know, these are facts that, if the mainstream media were at all fair, would be on all our minds and be touted throughout the country. We have the lowest recorded Black and Hispanic unemployment ever. That's because of Donald Trump. We have the lowest women unemployment rate since 1953. For the first time in over 20 years, real wages, particularly for those who are challenged at the bottom of the wage scale, are rising. But you know, all these good things doesn't mean that this effort to hobble him, this effort to prevent people from knowing what he's doing, this effort to distract him, isn't going to continue. And it's going to continue after the next election. I firmly believe he'll be reelected, but he's going to need supporters there, more supporters. You know, because I know Senator Cruz, I went and talked with him and said, you know, Senator, could you support me? You know, what does it look like up here? You need some help? He said, if we can get a few more conservatives, if we can have conservatives join me and Rand Paul and Marco Rubio and Mike Lee and Tom Cotton and Ben Sass, we're going to slowly become the center of the caucus, the conference, the Senate conference. We're going to have a conservative conference that'll have courage and be able to match the efforts of our president. That is the reason I'm looking to run. You know, I have to spend some time. We have to see if the support is going to be there. I want to talk to folks like you and see if in your minds this is an important race. I have to talk to people who would potentially look at financially supporting this race, people who would volunteer for this race and say, you agree. You know, Jeanne Shaheen is such a negative person for New Hampshire. I think back to the early years I was in New Hampshire. Like a lot of people, I came to live in New Hampshire. I'll tell you a little story about it. About, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, Jeanne Shaheen was at a fundraiser. Deval Patrick was there, the governor of Massachusetts. And Jeanne Shaheen thought, you know, a little bit of humor at this fundraiser. Why don't I get up and make a speech in which we'll talk about taking Bill O'Brien back to Massachusetts? We can't stand him here, Jeanne. She said, let's get rid of him. And one of the things I found at that point was, you know, we had some fun too. You know, we found out she came from Mississippi and sent a letter to Haley Barbour saying, could you take back Jeanne Shaheen? but what we found, and this is real important, it's the hallmark of a successful state that people come to live here. At that time, I was Speaker at the time, we looked over the membership of the New Hampshire House. Over 60% were born outside of the state. That's because this is a successful state. This is a state that we have to take care to preserve that success and not make it into one of these blue states that are overtaxed and overregulated. That's Jeanne Shaheen's world. She came to the state and immediately fought public service in New Hampshire, trying to put up the Seabrook nuclear station. And the end result of all that clamshell alliance effort is she drove our utility into bankruptcy, and we have the third highest electric rates in the country. I talk to businesses here, and they talk about the challenges of those rates. I talk to manufacturers that are here, and they're saying we can't expand given those states. That's Jeanne Shaheen. Then she became governor. And when she became governor, we had over 20 companies writing medical insurance in New Hampshire. Because of her efforts, because of her success in her efforts, she took that down to 2.5 companies. 2.5 companies. One would only write it up to a certain geographical area, not for the North Country. That is Jeanne Shaheen. She doesn't represent what New Hampshire is in the Congress. I look at, for example, the vote that came up recently on the socialist, the Green New Deal. It is beyond just being a silly piece of legislation. It is a destructive piece of legislation. It is saying that each one of you would have to vacate and rebuild your house in 10 years to meet new standards. We would do away with plane travel. We would do away with fossil fuels. We fuel entirely. I looked at President Trump today speaking down at that new LNG plant down in Louisiana, a $10 billion plant that's going to export gas to the rest of the world and bring jobs into the United States, and great jobs. That everyone there, as he said, would have to be laid off if that was a bill that was enacted. And Jeanne Shaheen had a chance to vote against that. And instead, all she could do was vote present. I'll tell you who wasn't present at the vote that day was the people of New Hampshire who have the good common sense to say, vote against that. She is nothing more than, you don't need it for another 6 years, a Democrat lemon. She comes back here and she basically wants us all to think she's everybody's grandmother and that she's doing good for us down there. And she's not. She's supposed to be the adult at the Socialist Party saying, cut it out, kids. She can't even do that. You know, a bill came up that would require hospitals to provide medical care for children who were born alive after abortion. Now, you can be wherever you want on the issue of abortion. And I will tell you, I'm fairly concerned about abortion. I'm a pro-life person, but you can be where you want on it. If a child is born alive, we preserve that child's life. How could she ever vote against that kind of a bill? You know, this is an issue that when I go around talking to people in New Hampshire, the only thing they don't get is that somebody would do something like that. You know, people come up to me and say, that can't be true, Bill. That can't be true. Look it up. It is true. You know, we deserve better in New Hampshire than that. We deserve someone who will do what I found to be the principal act when I was Speaker. And Senator Bradley was there, and we couldn't have done it without him. We faced, as a result of a overspending by the Democrats, almost $1 billion deficit, $800 or $900 million deficit, huge in the New Hampshire world. We hear these figures nationally. But in New Hampshire, that's a lot of money. We had to either increase taxes to make it up or reduce spending. And we took the hit to reduce the spending. We did what we said we were going to do. And you know what the most amazing thing was, the events leading up to that, is that for the first time ever, the Democrats had borrowed money to pay for operating expenses. They had basically gone to our children and our grandchildren and our unborn descendants and said, I can't afford the government we want today, so you pay for it later on. We're still paying off those bonds. We're still paying off, and the young people are going to be paying them off for a long time. That is immoral. And yet, on the federal level, we do that all the time. We have to turn this around. We have to have someone who will go down there and add to that critical mass of conservatives in the Congress who are going to say, let us stop it now. Let us go back to the core functions of the federal government, and let's make sure we're doing those well, and then let us turn over to the states the task that by all rights, by a constitutional analysis, should be theirs. Why do we have a Department of Education? Why do we have a Department of Energy? Why do we have a Department of Human Services, or the other departments of Housing and Urban Affairs? Those are the 50 sovereign states' obligations. Our obligation as a federal government is fairly limited. We have to protect ourselves against foreign enemies. We have to secure our borders. You know, it's a core function. We ought to be doing that, and we ought to be drawing back and bringing our finances under control. We have a federal deficit that exceeds, almost exceeds at this point, the GDP, the amount of goods and services we all produce in a year. That deficit exceeds it. We have an economy that's such a wonderful thing. It's $20 trillion. We could take every bit of the money we earn this year, and only then could we pay off this debt. It's going to be a problem, a real problem, and it's coming at us very soon. If interest rates go up from the traditional low that they are now, if they go up to the traditional area of 5 or 6%, we're going to be spending more in debt maintenance than we're spending to defend ourselves, that we're giving to the military, than anything. We have to draw it back, get back to the core functions, and we have to also address some problems of transition. One of the things that is really necessary is that we look at this medical insurance problem we have. You know, we've had so much meddling over the last 50, 60 years, ending in an absurd plan that Obama administration came up with, where they basically said, you will buy a product that you don't want. Now we're left with the legacy of this. We all know that in the end, the solution to the medical insurance problem is going to be the free market. Look at those portions of medical care that aren't covered by insurance. Plastic surgery, LASIK surgery. The cost of that has plummeted over the year because there has to be competition. But obviously, there cannot be an immediate return to a free market. There has to be a transition. When I was Speaker, we opposed extending Medicaid coverage to what was called the working poor. People, many of whom had insurance already. You know, many of whom their employees were providing insurance, but as soon as we extended Medicaid up to a higher income group, their employees got rid of it and say, hey, the government will take care of you. We can't abandon people like that. And I again admire what Senator Brantley has done to address that problem. It's just not something you can walk away from, but we can transition to it. We can allow full income credit to individuals for buying medical insurance. So just not a tax deduction, but a full credit, and then take a 20-year glide path to phase that out. We can take a look at folks who are of a certain income level and subsidize the insurance, but then take a glide path to let them know over time you're going to have to pay for it yourself. It is unfortunate that we find ourselves in a situation. If you and I were inventing the world anew, the last thing we'd ever do is tell the federal government, go get yourself involved in health insurance. That would be it'd be a predictive result of the mess we're in now. But we can move away from it. We have to have the courage to do that. We have to have the courage to look at all of the government programs and say, are they sustainable, or how can we make them sustainable? Because it can't go on this way. You look at the unfunded liability of the federal government, and you can choose a figure, and whatever figures you hear, it's almost impossible. Whether it's 80, 90 trillion dollars, it's nothing we'll be able to afford. So we have to start working those problems down now. That's why I'm looking at this position. I think I've shown as a state representative, as a Speaker of the House, the courage to take the hit, the courage to do what Donald Trump has done, which is allow the left to deal with me the way they will. They'll call you racist, they'll call you misogynist, they'll call you a bully. They will get their media allies to go along with it. They can't hurt my feelings. I've already seen myself in a political cartoon in the Concord Monitor looking like Adolf Hitler. I've already been called every name in the book. I've already had state police sit outside my house because of the death threats. I'm not going to let them stop me, and we shouldn't let them stop us. We need a better U.S. Senator. The United States deserves a better U.S. Senator coming out of New Hampshire, and I'm looking to see if I can get it to us. Thank you. I don't know if you want me to take any questions.
I don't know, does anyone have questions?
I don't have questions, just a comment. We can't be polite anymore. We have to be rough and tough, just like they are. We really have to get tough.
I think something's happening, and we've talked about it for a long, long time, that the public as a whole are beginning to understand that the Democrat rhetoric is ridiculous. And there's sort of been a public inoculation of it. You know, everyone can't be racist. Everyone can't be misogynist. And I think over time they're just going to be talking to the 20 or 30% of the base that are their radicals. I think the rest of the population, the rest of the voters are going to look at it and say, okay, what are you saying you're going to do? We don't care, racist, yeah, sure. What are you going to do? I mean, if you can call Mitt Romney a racist, if you can call George Bush a racist, if you can call, for that matter, Ted Cruz or Donald Trump, it's getting ridiculous. But it is, yeah. They want to chat. They want it to be big government. You know, one of the things I really noticed is one of the most startling takeaways I have from the legislature, and you know, Jeff and I were just talking about some vetoes here and talking about this issue, which is Republicans think about what they're going to do, and so you have to work with them if you're trying to line up a vote. What is your issue? And can I persuade you otherwise? I noticed when I was in the legislature that the Democrats would invariably, usually with only one or two members of the people, vote as a group. I sat next to at one point a woman by the name of Mary Nelson, who was a Democrat state rep before he became speaker. She'd been a senator state senator out of Nashville. She was a good woman. She was very pro-life and everything. And I'd sit there and I'd say, Mary, how do you vote that way? You know, we're sitting here talking, you tell me it's a crazy bill. Because, you know, we have to. Required. The orienting philosophy of the Democrats is power. The orienting philosophy of the Republicans is good government. And power in many ways is much more of an organizing philosophy than is us talking about good government.
They steamroll right over us.
So, Bill, you did something here tonight that didn't happen at the Lincoln Day dinner. That is mentioned Donald Trump's name. The Lincoln Day dinner, when I got there at 8 o'clock from the rest of the program, there was no mention. And from what I understand, prior to that, there was no mention of Donald Trump at that. Because there are certain folks that are up north that believe that Donald Trump was the reason we lost so badly in 2018. I don't think that's the case. We saw what happened to Kelly Ayotte, by her opening her mouth and attacking Trump.
Right.
I think that the bottom line is what I've learned is that you stand by your wingman and you don't let him down.
Well, here in Winnipesaukee, we do mention
I know.
You know, I kind of get the concern that people have with Donald Trump, and when he had his first house party, I hosted it with Steve Stefanik, who's the party chair now. And, you know, I watched people going, oh, this is the guy, like, he's kind of, you know, a little crass and all of that. What we found out is that this is a genuine person. This is a person who talks about things the way they are and doesn't hedge his rhetoric. You know, I look back at some of the more decisive presidents, and often they were somewhat crass. You ever listen to some of the stories about Abraham Lincoln? The guy used to tell dirty jokes all the time, and he had a pretty risque rhetoric, and yet he was a genius. And I think we're beginning to understand that Donald Trump is way beyond what the public, the mainstream media portrait has been. He's a person that understands people in the United States. You know what he cares about? And it's something that's real important to us now that we've gone for 8 years with the president. We can't be sure this is the case. He loves America. And it's coming through. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Come back again.
Well.
Crop TV.